So another one of those questions I get asked a lot are, what are some examples that I have in my life where I've listened to my intuition against, maybe what my mental mind was telling me? And I have a few just little examples of this. And one time I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, and had a voice in my head one day saying, you need to move to San Francisco. And I was like, what? I was like, I had been to San Francisco one time before, and I just done the touristy things, and I didn't really like it. And I was like, oh man, but I know I have to listen to this intuition because I know that that's what I need to do. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm moving to San Francisco. So I told my sister and my roommate at the time, and they were both like, oh, okay, cool. We'll move. We'll go too. We'll all meet there in 3 months. And so we did. And I obviously fell in love with San Francisco and stayed there. And we all stayed there for over 12 years and all met our husbands and started our families there, and it was just one of those little voices in my head that I had to listen to. And another time when I was in college, I remember just again hearing that little voice in my head saying, oh, well, you should study abroad. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, oh, well, I'll just go walk in. I was on campus at the time, and I was like, oh, I'll just go walk into the study abroad office. And they happened to be having a meeting in 5 minutes for studying abroad. And so I was looking through all the paperwork. I found the school I wanted to go to. And, at the end of the meeting, they're like, well, everything's basically filled up, but this is for, the following year. And I was like, oh man, I'm totally ready to go. And the woman's like, yeah, well, unless you wanted to go to that business school in Denmark. And I was like, that's exactly the school that I wanted to go to. And so she's like, okay, well, just get your paperwork in right away. And I did, and I left a month or two later. And so those are all things that kind of set me along my path. And another one good right around that time was when I was actually in Denmark. I was in the grocery store with some of my friends, and I, again, had a little voice in my head that said, put your stuff down and you need to go outside right now. And I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. I have a whole cart full of groceries. I'm with my friends, but I was like, it's just one of those things I just knew I needed to do, and walked right outside. And within just a few minutes, I walked by this guy, and we both stopped and looked at each other, took our sunglasses off and did a circle around each other, and we're like, what are you doing here? And it was a friend of mine from a college acquaintance, really, of mine. And so we got talking. We were both going to the same business school in Denmark, and just randomly ran into him on the street. And then we also had realized we actually grew up about 20 minutes from each other in Connecticut. So and he had lived in one of my apartments that I lived in too when I was in college. And I still keep in touch with him to this day, and he's a good friend of mine. But all these little things sometimes where you have that little inclination or that feeling or that little voice that you might think you're kind of crazy to listen to it, but those are the voices that I have just decided that, it's always leading me in the right direction. So yeah, I just thought I would share a couple of those little silly examples with you guys.